Okay, okay. We are going. Talk to me about Warzone. Are you winning?
I win if I play like a solid few hours in a day. I'll win a couple games. I'm not good though.
Nice. How
We
many?
play we play more for the fun. Like me and the guys on the bobsled team,
Yeah,
we'll get in a game and then it's more about having. We don't try to win. We're trying to see how many people we can blow up with rockets and try to kill people with cars. And
yeah,
we end up dying faster than anyone else, but we have a good time.
yeah. Oh fuck, that's just broken a memory. Did you ever play GTA 4?
Yeah, a little bit.
So you could like set up like a demolition derby, right? And basically
Yeah.
just smash each other with those cars. Oh, that's broken a memory. That was a great time. Oh yeah. I mean that's the way to do it though with video games though, right? Like no,
Yeah.
none of this like fucking e-leagues or e-sport, I'm not, if they
No.
want to do that, crack on. But it's there for entertainment rather than to sweat yourself silly.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not the dude that will start cussing me out because I die. But there's a lot of those guys out there, and it's hilarious. You kill them, and all you hear back is, "Oh, and they just start screaming at you and calling you every name that they know, and it's just like, it's just a game, bro.
Yeah.
Like
And
we're
you
just
find
driving around cars shooting rockets. You just happen to be
yeah,
in the way.
yeah. And you find out they're about 12-year-old, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like what's going on? Like I'm getting cussed out by a 12-year-old.
Yeah, man, it's intense. They
Yeah.
take it way too seriously. We just have fun.
Yeah, mate, that's the way to do it. How many people are on the team?
In total, we've got probably 20, maybe a little over 20 on the men's side.
Oh wow. I didn't know it was that much.
Yeah. So, yeah, we got a good chunk of guys that are out there. I mean, it's split up between like the national team, and then we have the NAC team, and then we've got like Devo guys and all that kind of stuff. But
Hmm,
just in terms of like the national and the NAC teams, there's probably close to 20 guys.
hmm. How did you get into bobsled? It's a bit out there, right? I think
It just randomly came up on TV, and I happened to be around a group of individuals at the time who are all into sports and everyone's training, and it came up and they told me, it's like, that's the sport that you got to go try out for. So I was like, yeah, sure. And then one of the guys that was there with me that day happened to know like a coach or an athlete or something, and got me in touch with one of the coaches. They emailed me, asked me to come do a combine, and then went out there, did well enough, and stuck with it ever since.
um I mean it seems like everyone's followed in your footsteps, right? Like it seems like every bloody CrossFitter is now going over to do bloody bobsled and I'm like, well, that's a bit far left, but hey, like Blaine's been doing that for the past few years or whatever. Is everyone just copying? Like
Yeah, except for I wasn't good enough at CrossFit to people considered me like the CrossFitter that went to bobsled. It was just like almost like I never really belonged in CrossFit. And then once they found out I did bobsled, they're like, yeah, that makes more sense than going and doing 20-minute workouts.
yeah.
But no, that's very true. We were actually, I can't remember who I was talking with this about, but on the men's side, not so much. Like I've talked to James a little bit. He's been sliding with Australia, and he just was kind of asking for advice and trying to figure out like, just equipment, where to buy stuff, do all that kind of stuff. And James is having a great time doing it. On the women's side, though, you start to see there's a lot more women, especially from other countries, that are also trying to get into bobsleigh. And I think a big reason of that is the women don't have as much feeder sports for bobsled as the men do. So, like, especially in the States, you got football, track and field, like more of the sports are kind of generalized towards guys being strong, explosive, and fast. And on the
Mm,
women's side, you don't generally have that. Like track and field athletes, sure, but outside of that, you don't really have a sport that makes people want to be like as strong as they can, explosive as they can, and still like a well-rounded athlete. So I think you see women coming from the CrossFit side because they spend a lot of time in the gym, which is going to be a huge need for the women's side of bobsled. They can be strong, they can be explosive, and then all you just have to really do at that point is learn to run. And if you
mm,
can figure that out, then you're probably going to be pretty diesel at bobsled.
mm. Yeah, it's really interesting like comparing like the UK and the US kind of feeder sports to Olympics, right? Because you look over to the US and basically every sport is fast, explosive, then sit down, and then broken up into segments, right? And then basically in the UK, it's like usually because you've got a game with 11 or 15 guys, and you have 11 or 15 guys in your team, so it's like you're making the whole game whether you like it or not, sunshine. Um,
Yeah.
and they're forced to play 80, 90 minutes or whatever they play, hockey, fucking netball or whatever. And it's really interesting kind of looking at it that way, because then you kind of like transfer it over to the CrossFit, right? And then you get the Scandinavians, the Central Europeans that end up dominating the longer kind of sucky workouts. Yet when it comes to the fast, explosive power, strength, it's all in the States. And it
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's just the vast difference of what kids grow up wanting to do. Like in the States, everyone wants to play baseball, basketball, or football. It's usually one of those three. And then you kind of do the other sports as like your off-season sport that you just fill up time throughout the year with. So if you do football, then you probably did track. If you did basketball, maybe you did baseball. Like you just kind of drop in everything that you can. Where living in Europe for the past 5, 6 years now, like you see that the sports that kids grow up doing are all soccer, maybe handball,
Mm.
some track and field, but you don't have those same feeder sports. And you can kind of see that in the CrossFit world where, especially on the women's side, like women outside of the US absolutely dominate in the sport of CrossFit, where the men kind of are split. Like you've got some men in the US that do really well, but usually the men in whole will dominate like the lifting type events, where the men in Europe kind of do well in the lifting events, but they really dominate more in the cardio or more endurance type events. And you've kind of seen that split one
Mm.
way or another a little bit more on the men and women's side.
Why do you think it's a bigger split between men and women?
Um, man, honestly, I think a lot of it just has to do with what people are able to do in terms of financially. Like in the European regions, I know that it's a lot easier to find financial support from sponsors and everything on the women's side in terms of being able to continuously train and be closer to a full-time CrossFit athlete than it would in the States. Like there's just so many athletes and there's so many people. Like you have 300 million people in the States where let's say you're one of the best in Italy, like you're probably competing against maybe 1,000, maybe a few hundred that might be at the level of you, where in the States you might be competing against 100,000 are at the same level as you.
Mm.
So I think there's a little discrepancy there. But like previously too, is whatever sport you grew up doing, you can see a little bit where that favoritism is at. Like you got stronger dudes that are using the US, you got more enduring people that are usually in Europe, and it's just because those feeder sports are slightly different from growing up wherever they're at.
Mm. And see, I'm fascinated in like the academy and the youth development throughout the US, because I think you've got it right. Like there's opportunities available. Yeah, granted, there's holes in it, but there's holes in everything, right? But there's opportunities available for youth athletes to then develop and then kind of progress through the ladder. Yet you flick that over to the other side, and you might take. I'm going to take Eastern Europe, for example, simply because I've been there and I know the landscape. So they've got the landscape to um, climb hills, mountains, all that sort of stuff. Really big on ice hockey and all that, but their youth development is non-existent. It's kind of like if you make it, you make it. Brilliant. You might be able to get a sponsorship if you're like the best in the country. Yet if you're top 10, you're fucked because you're not going to get any help. You're not going to have anything to get there. It's kind of like, if you want to get fit, go run the hills. If you want to train weights, go find a gym, figure it out on your own. And I think kind of flipping it that way, there's pros and cons, right? Because if you get through that in a European country, they'll kind of highlight you and they'll throw a sponsorship at you, or they'll throw cash at you. Plus, Europe is easy because you can just hop to another country and maybe get a better opportunity there. I know a lot of. I was talking to fuck. Christoph, Laura's brother, Laura's older brother,
Hmm.
Christoph Horvath. He went from Hungary to Spain simply because there's more opportunity in Spain than there is in Hungary. So it's literally
Yeah.
just, you get in a car and you can drive there. But in other places like the States, like, yeah, you've got different states, but it's still the same country.
Yeah, exactly. And I know people have done the same thing that have moved from Sweden to Spain,
Mm,
just because there's going to be more opportunity for them there or other country. Like it's easy to just hop over a border and all of a sudden you're one of the top person in that country and you're able to secure sponsorship dollars and do all that. So, and I agree on the youth side too. Like US, there's school sports basically since the time that you wanted to start school. Like if you want to be involved in some sort of sport, you can figure it out. Where in Europe, it's all club. Like the schools don't have teams, they don't
yeah,
have organizations.
yeah.
So if you want to do something, you've got to go find a club, pay to be in that club, and spend money to play sports. Where in the States, you can grow up and basically pay close to nothing and play whatever sport that you want to do up until the point that you're 18. You don't have to pay extra for it. You can just go through your school and like there might be small fees associated with it, but nothing like going to a club.
Mm. Wow, that I didn't actually know. I didn't know you could play high skill sport for free. The penny didn't
Yeah,
drop.
like when I was in high school, so from the time I was 14 to 18,
Mm,
you pay like a yearly fee that's like basically just to get into any sport, and that's like maybe $25. But outside of that, you could essentially play that sport for free. Like our school drove us around to other schools and we played other teams. You need to buy like the essential pieces of equipment. So if you're playing football, like you gotta go out and get yourself a pair of cleats or some gloves or something. But for the most part, you don't really have to spend a ton of money to practice, play, compete. You could possibly get noticed. If you do well enough, you can go play in college and continue to get that paid for. You don't even have to pay for college. You can get better coaching, more practice, play against better components, and like eventually that whole system just feeds into professional lifestyle, which is why everyone in the States grows up wanting to play one of those three big sports.
mm. And it also provides you with an opportunity of a way out, right? Like if you're
Oh, of
in a
course. Yeah.
underprivileged area and you get to come up through this athletic development, and that might be able to pay for your schooling. So then that goes back through your family, right? So a higher educated parent will probably breed a higher educated kid, and blah blah blah. You leave the area, like I think that's the way to do it, mate. And I think a lot of young people, whether it's male or female, it doesn't necessarily matter. I think a lot of them are misunderstood, um, and they're not really provided with the opportunity to use sport as a gateway. It's kind of like, oh no, you're not going to be a professional athlete, so you can't do this. It's like, well, they can do it to a pretty freaking big standard, you know what I mean? And then use it
Yeah.
to catapult themselves further. And I'd like to see the rest of the world catch on, but I don't know how to do it.
No, I mean, just living in Iceland, it's all club system here. So
Mm,
a lot of kids do some sort of sport just because their parents want them to be occupied for another couple hours after they get out of school.
yeah.
So they go find a club and whatever, usually it's whatever their friends doing, they go join that one. So if their friend wants to play soccer, they go play soccer. If their friend's doing gymnastics, they go do gymnastics, and they kind of just they stick with like one, maybe two sports and just do it all year. And that's all that they do. So the system's a lot different, benefits them in one way or another. I guess it benefits kids in the States obviously a different way. So you just kind of have to deal with whatever way you're kind of growing up in. But
Mm,
also you think about like the parents or the system that it's set up, and they grew up in that system so they think it's normal, and then everyone in the States, they grow up and they don't realize that like the high schools in Europe don't have high school teams. Like they just think it's bizarre that there's no such thing as organized sports in school.
mm. Yeah, it's mental. Like I remember, like you got to give each other a lift to get to a game, and then it's like you turn up and you're like, well, we're missing someone. Or like he just couldn't find a lift to get to the game. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, he's a starting
Yeah.
fucking player and no one could give him a lift. It's like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? Like you just kind of like shabbing together like people from the year below who didn't even play your sport because we needed like a substitute, you know what I mean? Because technically you need like 3 over in case injury. And your coach looks at you and is like, look, you're playing the full 80 minutes, even if you break a leg, because we got no subs.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Yeah, it is. It's funny kind of having the comparison. Um, but I also think it's the mindset too with like Scandinavians, right? With that sort of Northern Europe is like you're pushed to go do a sport. It's like, kind of go do something. Whatever it is, like make sure you do it. And it's kind of like a box you have to tick. Yet again, comparing it to the UK, like I think it was 14, 15 is the cutoff for ladies. They end up stop playing sport and it's kind of, oh, whatever. And then it's about 16, 17, maybe 18 for the gents, and they just cut off. And then
Mm.
again, whatever, like you no longer play sport. You might play a football game once a week on a five-a-side. And because you do fuck all else in the week, you're probably going to roll an ankle or bloody pull a hamstring, right?
Yeah.
And the whole mindset towards sport then kind of gets flicked over to the other side, as now it's a spectator sport rather than a participation sport, which I think is really
Mm.
sad.
Yeah.
Um, Flipping it completely on its head, I'm super interested to learn about all the power stuff, because I mean, you and bobsled go hand in hand, literally, because
A
it's
little
like,
bit.
I mean, like you said about the 20-minute workout with a CrossFit, that's not a workout I'd write for you. That's a workout I'd write for you if I wanted to be the fucking devil himself.
Yeah.
So like, is that one of the reasons why you were like, ah, okay, I'm gonna throw my chips into the bobsled basket?
I mean, it definitely helped on making that decision. Like the whole process of everything is like I didn't even start CrossFit until 2014, around then, and or maybe 2013, give or take. And I was able to progress my way through, make it to the CrossFit Games at 2016, and that's like the pinnacle of that sport. Is like if you can make it to the CrossFit Games, then you've hit the highest level. And although mine was on a team, I didn't go individually. I competed there, and as soon as it was over, I just realized like the amount of work that I put in and everything that I did to get to that point was cool, but I didn't want to continuously do it because by the time the games was over, I felt terrible. Like my body was done. I didn't want to train. I didn't want to do anything. And regardless of what sport that you're in, I feel like you should still want to stay in that sport and compete. And I just felt like I beat myself up to the point where it's like, all right, one and done, went to the games. That's a cool experience. But it was more like I can just check that off versus wanting to stay then in that world and kind of compete in there. So that was 2016. So from there to 2018, I really was just training the way that I've always known to train. Even in high school, it was just I was always trying to be strong and explosive. It was just the way that I enjoyed training. And when I found bobsled, I went through the combine process, did well enough in that. Obviously, being a strength and power based sport, the type of training I was doing for that sport, I enjoyed it. Like it's still to this day, like I'm excited. I get to go back to training and kind of begin my off season training next week, and that's what I've been looking forward to for the past 2 weeks that I've taken off so far. And I enjoy that. And regardless of how hard bobsled gets, like I still enjoy the process and I enjoy training and I enjoy sliding and I enjoy getting better at it. Where in CrossFit, there was days where like I dreaded it. I didn't want to go train. I looked at the workout that I had to do that day and I was like, I'm not going to the gym. I don't want to do this. And for me, it was just like, all right, if you don't enjoy, like I get there's a point where you want to push yourself and you have to do things that suck. But for me, like even if it's like doing sets of 8 on back squat or doing sprints that were to the point where your legs are burning, like I enjoy that type of pain. I didn't enjoy the 15 minutes of just doing burpees and gymnastics movements and then throwing stuff around. Like that kind of pain, I never enjoyed pushing myself through. So
Mm,
for sure bobsled fits my style of what I would generally be doing anyways. And then you have the whole atmosphere of what it's like to be on the team with the other guys, the competitive atmosphere of being at the track and pushing a sled and going for the ride and doing all that. Like all of that is just kind of solidified this as like, I wish I would have found this sport 10 years ago, because probably still would be in it to this day if I did.
Mm. Yeah, I completely agree. You need that balance, right? You need that balance of it's going to be hard and it's going to be hard work, but at the same time, like you need to kind of crave the process and crave that level of pain. Like if you genuinely don't enjoy it, you ain't going to be in it very long. Um,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah, I completely agree with that. Like I can relate that back over to rugby. Um, you know, days where it's -5, -6 outside, and you've got to fucking train on a frozen ground. It's like, well, if you didn't love the sport, love the people that you're training with, then you're not going to do that, right? You're just not going
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
go outside. You're not going to go to the gym or do that 15-minute workout of burpees. Which I mean, why would you want to do it? It's just
Yeah.
weird.
I mean, that's the same for Bob. There's definitely aspects of the sport that none of the athletes enjoy. Like everyone realizes like, all right, this is the part that sucks, but it's the type of suck that they're willing to go through because they enjoy the outcome of it, which is the same reason why people push themselves through sucky CrossFit workouts, or they go do an Ironman, and part of that might suck to them, is they push them through that point that sucks because they enjoy the outcome of it. And for them, maybe it's completing the workout or just finishing an Ironman or running a mile, whatever it may be. So there's aspects of bobsled where we've got to go outside and run, and it's -10 outside, and we got to warm up and train or do whatever it is that we need to do, because our sport is basically performed at freezing temperatures in the coldest places in the world, up in the Alps, and just doing all that. So that aspect of it is definitely not fun. There's aspects of training that are not fun, but we all know that, okay, you just push yourself through this part that sucks, and you get to go do the fun part and be even better at it, which is pushing the sled and racing, which is the pinnacle of our sport. So
Mm.
there's aspects of pushing yourself through suck because you know what the ending is going to be, and then just pushing yourself through the suck because you've already signed up for it and you're pretty much stuck there. So that's kind of how I felt when I was doing CrossFit, is like, I've already committed to this team that I'm going to stick with it through the games, and I hated training probably half of that year. And
Mm.
it's to the point where after the games was over, I knew immediately, like, I'm never coming back. Not going to happen again. And it's not for me.
Have you done a CrossFit workout since?
And maybe a couple times, not, but there was a time in 2018 I was in San Diego. I was working at CrossFit Invictus, so I
Mm.
was coaching CrossFit athletes, doing strength programming for them, and just kind of working at the gym down in San Diego. And I would do like a CrossFit workout maybe once a week and just kind of hop in with the guys and do the workout. I had no intention of competing,
Mm.
and I found to the point where I started just changing the workout mid workout because it sucks so much. And I was like, I'm not going to push myself through this because I don't give a shit what happens. So there was a point where it's like, oh, 3 rounds of whatever. And I remember one of it was you had to do 10 muscle ups every round. And it was like, end up going to be like 40 total muscle ups. And by the second round I got into it, I was like, I'm not doing 10. And immediately I was like, I don't even know why I'm doing this workout if I'm not going to do it all. I would never say I'm not going to do all 5 of my back squats. Like I would never just go, I'm just going to do 3. Like I'm going to do all 5 because I enjoy that. But that was kind of like the aha moment for me. It was like, I just did 7, and then I dropped down and went to the next part of the workout. And I was like, I'm not ever doing a CrossFit workout again because I don't enjoy it. I'm not shaving off these reps because it's fun. I'm shaving it off because it sucks and I don't want to continue to do this. So from that point on, I never trained in CrossFit again. I remember
Wow.
that one specific workout with the muscle ups. So I was just like, I'm never doing this again. I'm finished.
Oh, that's awesome. But it's also like really important though, right? Like it's important for people to hear that like you don't necessarily have to do one thing. Like you can go do something that you enjoy, right? Like fitness hurts. It's inevitable. It will fucking hurt whatever you do. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like you don't have to do something that you hate doing. Like if you don't like lifting weights, you don't have to do it. Like if you
Of
don't
course.
like running, you don't have to do it. Like go
Exactly. Yeah.
choose whatever
No,
you
I
want to do.
100%. Yeah. 100% agree with that. And like next week, I start my off season training, and I already know for the first 2 weeks, it's going to absolutely be terrible
Yep.
because I've taken 3 weeks off now of training just to kind of give my body some rest from the season that we've gone through. So this first 2 weeks of going in, like it's gonna be sore. I'm gonna have to push myself through shit that I don't want to do, and I'm not going to not do it though because I really enjoy that. Like burning through a set of squats or just some cleans or snatch, like whatever it may be, is enjoyable to me, and I know that that pushing is going to be the kind of pushing that I like to push myself through versus all the nonsense that I was doing before.
Mhm. And it's just like it's the initial barrier, right? As well, like when you get back into the training, like you've just got to break through that wall, and then you start enjoying those trainings again, rather than the first week or so or two or maybe three, like you feel like you've been hit by a frigging train after every session, and that
Yeah,
it gets old real quick. Like the first session, you're like, oh yeah, I've missed this feeling. Yeah, this is great, and then you've got to train sore as hell, and you're like, oh, like,
it
nah,
just
this is not good.
compiles up until it kind of fades away finally.
Yeah.
But not okay, I've even though I've bashed on CrossFit, like I don't dislike CrossFit at all. Like I think it's great modality of training. I think
Mm.
it's awesome for people. I don't want people to sit here and think that I absolutely hate CrossFit and everything about it, which is not true. It's just not for me. I know that, and I completely am aware that it is for other people and they love it. So when you hear me say that it was nonsense or I hate it, like that's just for me as a person, but not for everybody. So if you're doing CrossFit and it's what you absolutely love and you love to push yourself through it because you like, then 100% stick with it. Don't
100%.
think that I'm an idiot just
No,
because I said it's stupid.
no, the thing is, like, we live in a noisy world, right? Like everyone's got an opinion, but everyone is entitled to their opinion, and I think everyone should be able to hear others and what they like to do, and also respect it, like, and respect themselves too, right? So they someone might listen to you and be like, oh well, I enjoy doing CrossFit. Cool, like, go do it then. Like, just because someone else
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
necessarily like doing it doesn't mean you have to fucking stop. Like, just keep doing what you want to do. That's awesome. Like, carry on. It's the same
Yeah,
thing. Like, I wouldn't
yeah,
want to sit in a bloody metal thing and run down a track. Like, I would not go do bobsled. No way. It's like, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
individuality. Do whatever you want to do type stuff. But there's no way I'm doing bobsled.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, I
It's
wish I would have found it 10 years ago.
It's crazy. What's the skeleton? That shit is nuts.
So in terms of like craziness, luge is the absolute most crazy.
Is that where you go face
So
down?
luge is where they go. No, you're feet first. So you're
Feet
lying
first.
on your back, going feet first. So they're of the three sliding sports. So you've got luge, skeleton, and bobsled. Luge is the absolute craziest because they go the fastest and they can hardly see where they're going because they're trying to look basically like down their body towards their feet. They steer with their feet, and it's just insane what they do, and it's incredibly dangerous. So if they crash, it's absolutely horrific for them because they're the speeds that they're going into and the way that they can crash is just to the point where it's like they're going to seriously hurt themselves. The next crazy would be bobsled, just because we go the next fastest. We're slightly faster than the skeleton athletes in terms of like top speeds we can hit on similar tracks. The difference is again when we crash, it's pretty devastating at points because you can have four guys in a sled that's going 90 plus miles an hour or like close to 160 kilometers, and you've got 600 kilos that could all of a sudden just land on its head. And you've got four dudes that don't have seatbelts holding on to a giant metal frame, hoping that they're not going to get hurt out of that. And then the least crazy of the three, which is still very crazy in people's minds, I would say is skeleton because they're slightly safer because they are going head first and their crashes, they're going to still get hurt. But the fact that they can still like see where they're going, when they crash, from just my experience and talking to some of the skeleton athletes, like they don't generally get too banged up just from the aspect that they're already so low to the ice and they're not going nearly as fast as like luge and they're going head first. It's a better, like if you're going to choose, I'm going to crash going feet first or head first, you should choose to go head first and crash versus feet, just from my experience in the sliding world. So definitely three crazy sports, but that's kind of like where I would rank luge, bobsled and then skeleton on the terms of what's the craziest one to do.
Why is it safer to go head first than feet first? Because I'd look at it and think the other way around.
I, the I think the big thing is also the speed. So skeleton
Okay.
can see where they're going a lot easier. They're not going nearly as fast. Like luge athletes go faster feet first down a track than a bobsled with 4 guys in it goes. Like they're just
Jesus.
flying down the same tracks. And their sport is a lot more dangerous because there's a lot less regulations. It's kind of like the Wild West. They can pretty much do whatever they want and make sure that they make it down the track. Where and like bobsled and skeleton, there's weight regulations, there's gear regulations, there's a bunch of different regulations that try to make it a little bit more even from team to team. Where luge doesn't have all that same stuff going in it.
Like I always think of, like a water slide when you're a kid, and you get a little bit full of yourself, right? You get a little bit cocky, so you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna go down face first. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be Billy Big Bollocks on the block, and I'm gonna go down face first. I equate it to that, right? I shit myself going down that. Now I'm not on a board going like a million miles an hour down an ice in the freezing cold in the middle of the Alps. It's like a 10-meter bloody water slide, and then I'm gonna hit water at the end. Like, you lads and ladies are gonna hit ice, like smash into the walls. Like, that blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean that's why I said all 3 of them are crazy. That's for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, luckily we haven't seen too many drastic crashes or anything in the past couple of years. There's been a few where people, as far as I'm aware, like the last person to die doing a sport was in luge. Like I don't think, and I could be wrong. I've only been in the sport for 3 years, so maybe something happened, but like nobody's died doing skeleton in recent years. Nobody's died doing bobsled in recent years. I believe luge is the last sport of the 3 to have somebody actually like in competition or training die competing in that sport.
Mm. But then it also touches on the factor of, like, if you love it so fucking much and it's like so held so dear to your heart, you would die for your sport. Like, I can
Yeah,
relate to
100%.
that. It's just because I wouldn't throw
Yeah.
myself down a bloody track doesn't necessarily mean it's not right, right? Like, yeah, if you like keel over on a pitch or whatever, like, I'd have been able to say, yeah, okay, job done. Like, that's the way it was supposed to go. So yeah, I can relate to that. A lot of people might not be able to relate to it and probably think we're crazy, but all good ideas sound like bad ideas
At some point.
at some point. Yeah, yeah. Most of the time, just before you're about to do it, and then when you
Yeah.
finished, it
Oh,
was
this is a
like, oh,
great
it was
idea. And then as soon as you start, you go, this is a bad idea.
this is a bad idea. This is really bad. What was it like
Yeah.
the first time you went down in a sled?
So the first sled, I was in Lake Placid. I went down in a 2-man sled, and you don't know, like everyone's trying to tell you like, oh, just hold on, it'll be bumpy and you'll feel it out. But you like there's nothing to actually compare it to. Like if I were to tell you it's similar to getting tackled and like it's not, or if it's similar
Mm.
to getting checked playing hockey, it's not like that either. You're in a basically a 50-second car crash and you're holding on to a frame. You're folded in half,
Oh
and
wow.
it's just you have no clue what's going on. Like you jump into a 2-man, your feet are out in front and your hands are out in front, and you're pulling your head down in between your knees, and you hold this position just to stay low for just aerodynamics in the sled, and then it's rattling around, you're bumping around, you don't know anything that's going on. It is like being in a 50-second long car crash. And then you get down to the bottom, you've got to yank up on the brakes to stop the thing, and then you feel dazed, you like are confused, even though it was still like the biggest adrenaline rush you've ever had in your life. So you're kind of like shaking because you're so amped up and ready to go again. So usually at Lake Placid, that's generally the roughest track in terms of like it's very complex. It's 100% a driver's track. Like that track, you got to know it in and out, otherwise you're not going to make it down. And other countries hate coming to the US and sliding at Lake Placid just because of the fact that it's such a difficult track and it's not a good track to crash on. Like there's not necessarily a good track to crash on, but there's some tracks that if you happen to tip over a wreck, you pretty much know like that person's going to be okay. But if you crash in Lake Placid, everyone's like, "Oh shit!" Like they're all watching to make sure it's okay.
Mm.
So for that reason, having your first trip at that track is a good indicator on whether or not you're going to stay in the sport. So we'll have some rookies come in and they'll do their first trip, and you can kind of tell like that person's not sticking around anymore. Or if you can tell that they like are itching to get back to the top, then you know like, all right, that person's probably coming back next year. So it's a good kind of final tryout process to see if someone's gonna stick around with it.
That that adrenaline rush must be the best morning coffee you've ever had.
Oh yeah, and for the fact that on like race day, I mean, we were already pre-workout up and caffeined up and ready to go. So, I mean, that type of feeling is amplified on a race day.
Yeah.
But for the first time going, yeah, it's hard to compare that type of feeling or that type of rush to anything else you've ever done.
My God. What was, do you know the speed you hit on the first run?
No, in general, in Placid in a two man, like you're gonna be mid 80s, so like 80 miles an hour or something. So like that's like 120, 130 kilometers an hour. I'm not sure what the conversion is, but it's not extremely fast. So it's more of a technical track.
Hmm. But I mean, still, like you're on this little metal thing with no roof on it, going 80 miles an hour, whizzing around, and you're folded in two, and it's the first time you're on it. You'll be
Yeah.
like, "What is this?"
Yeah, it was rough.
Wow. So, like, what's the what's the training like for bobsled?
Man, like if you're just generally in the off season, you got to train like you're a sprinter, but like you're trying to be like the world's biggest sprinter. So rather than being like 85 kilos and trying to run a 10-second 100, you're trying to be 100 and 105 kilos and trying to run a 10.5-second 100. So being the absolute fastest person in the world is not the most important thing, because you've got to also move a 200 kilo sled that's going to be in front of you. So there's a lot of aspects of it that is strength and power based. So a good chunk of our time for training is also spent in the weight room.
Hmm.
But you need to prioritize sprinting because our job is running with that sled down the track. So you got to have a really solid base of sprint work. You kind of build your strength and power up through the weight room, and then you try to practice pushing as much as you can. There's not a lot of things you can do in the weight room or on a track that mimic actually pushing a sled other than just going out and pushing a sled. So we've got a training sled that we have in New York where it's basically two hills. So you start on top of one hill, you push, you slide down, goes up a hill, and then comes back to the start. So you can just keep doing those repetitions over and over again and working on your technique, working on maybe one day you're driving it out of the hole, maybe one day you're doing full pushes, like taking it all the way down the crest, trying to go as fast as you can. You can kind of break that up and do different things the same way you would sprints or lifting in the weight room. But it's hugely important that we push a lot in the off season, um, just to kind of mimic that. Because like I said, there's not a lot of things you can do to train to push something better other than just going out and pushing something hard and trying to get better at it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's
Yeah.
200 kilos. The sled is 200 kilos.
Yeah, give or take. I mean, it could be like a four-man sled. The minimum weight that it is 210 kilos. On a two-man sled, the minimum weight that the sled can be, I believe, is like 180 or somewhere around
Huh.
there. Um, because the sport is regulated in terms of the maximum amount of weight,
Hmm.
you might need to add weight to that sled to make it a little bit heavier. So in a four-man sled, when you add the four guys into it, with the sled, they'll weigh us at the end of a race and see how heavy we are. And you can't be more than 680 kilos. So the sled by itself has to be a minimum of 210, and then the sled with the 4 guys can't weigh more than 680. So let's say you got 4 light guys and you want to try to go fast, you're going to have to add weight to the sled in order for that to get close as you can to 680, because the goal is try to get to 679.9 without going over,
Mm.
because it's a gravity and friction sport. You got to slide down a track. So a heavier sled's going to slide at faster speeds than a lighter sled is. So you kind of make up that discrepancy by just adding weight to the sled. So yeah, like you can have a 200 kilo sled, you can have a 195 kilo sled, just depending on how heavy the pilot is and how heavy the brakeman is.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, like looking at it as an outsider's perspective, looking at the sled, you're like, that doesn't weigh that much. Whatever. Like, you add in these four huge dudes, like, yeah, it's gonna weigh a little bit, but fucking 210 kilos, like, yeah, that's a decent weight. You're gonna have to end up shoving down this bloody this track.
Yeah, it jumps up there pretty quick. I mean, it's on ice, so it's not
Yeah.
huge. It's not like a effort. It's not going to be the same thing as if you go out and push a sled on a turf or
Mm,
on concrete or anything like that.
mm,
So it gets moving fairly easily. But in our sport, we're going down to the hundredth of seconds. So
mm,
you want to try to get 4 big dudes that can push the light sled, because if you can beat them by 2 or 3 hundredths at the top,
mm.
by the time you hit top speeds and make it down to the bottom, you might be up by a tenth or 2 tenths at that point. So, I mean, I've seen races where first to 10th place are all within like a hundredth or two of each other,
Ah,
and you could tell the difference between, obviously driving plays a big impact to that, but also like this team was 200s down at the start and they never made it back up. So maybe if they could have dropped 100s at the start by having a lighter sled or whatever it may be, there's so many variables that go into it. That's kind of the game that we play, but
mm.
you can see a huge difference in just all of that going down in terms of weight and pushing and how you ride and everything.
Wow. Yeah, like there's a lot of politics that goes into it as well, right? Like you kind of got to pick your battle and kind of and go from there.
There, yeah. In our, I can't speak for like how other countries go, but in the US, I would say 60% of the sport is based off of how you perform, but 40% of the sport is like the politics side of things. And are you doing things outside of just straight up performing that makes other people want to slide with you? So that
Mm,
could be sled work, that could be showing up at the track on your days off when you're not sliding and helping out the people that are sliding. And do the coaches see that, and do the coaches see that you work as just as hard off the sled as you do on the sled? So I mean, there's a huge part of it that goes into just, are you a teammate that other people want to be around? And if that's the case, then you're more likely going to be racing and be on teams and be around more often, versus you could be the best guy out there, and if you're just a total jackass and you don't do anything and you're lazy, you're not going to be on a sled, just because nobody's going to want to be on the same team as you.
mm. It's the stuff about professional sports that people don't tell you about, right? When you want to get into it, it's like, oh yeah, like work hard and go play your sport or go do your sport. It's like, okay, wicked, I can do that. It's like, oh no, Sonny Jim, like you've got a lot of other things you need to do. Like, yeah,
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 yeah, and that's
definitely.
that's 100% it. But I mean, it's any sport when you get to the level you're talking about, professional or Olympics, there's going to be some aspect of politics or business side to it, where it's not going to be simply because you might be the fastest or jump the highest or be the best at whatever sport that you're doing. There's a
Mm,
business side to it where a lot of that is, do people just like you in general, and do they want you to be around? So you've seen it. I mean, we've seen it a ton over here in professional sports. You have somebody that's a great athlete who you hear reports about who's just a total jackass and nobody likes him, and then they get traded. And it's like, why'd you trade such a good person? It's like, no, he's a terrible person. Nobody wants to be here, regardless of how good he might be at XYZ sport. He's just absolute nightmare to be around. So we got rid of him.
mm.
So I mean, it's the same thing in bobsled. So you could be the best pusher on the team, but if everyone hates you, you're probably not going to be pushing a sled in races, and that's really all that matters in terms of making an Olympic team, is, are you pushing a sled in races? So That's kind of where I say like it's 60-40. So obviously the majority of what we get graded on is performance based, but a good chunk is also based off of what we're doing off the ice.
Yeah, for sure. And like no one wants to be part of a team with an arsehole, right? Like if
Yeah,
someone's there like kind of throwing a spanner in the works all the time and doing things for themselves and not for the team, then they're not going to be part of a team sport for very long. And like you'll have experienced it too. Like you will literally put your life on the line for the person next to you. But if that person next to you is a dickhead, you're not going to do it. You just be like, nah, and then
yeah,
that's when
exactly.
the team falls apart, right? So, yeah, I completely understand that. And then if you look at it from like a managerial coaching perspective, it makes sense as well. You look after the team first rather than the individual. Like, cut the individual; it doesn't matter how good they are. You look after the team first,
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
So, like, what if say for example we got a sled with four men on it? What would be the roles of all four of them?
So if you're looking at a sled while it's on the line at the
Mhm.
top of a track, like right before they're about to push, the guy that's furthest in front on the left is the pilot. He's going to be the one that hops in first. And then his goal is to just get the sled down as fast as possible. So he's got a little system in the front of it's basically two pulleys, and he's got two rings that he grabs on, and he's just moving his hands enough left and right to where they're attached to the front axle. And what they do is they move those front runners left and right. So those are the only things that really move on the sled is that front axle. So from there, you got the guy who's on the back left hand side. He hops in second. His goal is simply to jump into the sled as soon as he sees that pilot jump in. So he's pushing as hard as he can. Pilot jumps in, and then his goal is to get in as smooth as he can right behind the pilot. Kind of the same thing that the guy that's on the right hand side, he's the three guy. So he gets in third. And again, his goal is to push as hard as he can, hop in, and then get into position as fast as he can. And the guy in the back is the one that actually calls the cadence for us to start. So he's called the brakeman because he's the one that actually pulls the brakes. So when we get on the line, everyone kind of gets set up. He yells set. That lets the pilot in the front know that the three dudes behind him are ready to push. The pilot will do some sort of signal that he's ready. So all of our pilots usually tap on the sled to say, like, I heard you say set, I'm ready to go as well. And then he says back set ready. And as soon as it says ready, all of us try to push the sled at the same time. So it's almost like a metronome. So he'll say set, the two taps, and it's like back set ready, push. And everyone tries to move at the same time. So once we all jump in, he's the last one to jump in. We try to be as aero as possible. So we stay low in the sled. We let the pilot kind of do what he's doing. We're trying not to move around as much. Let him just kind of feel out the track. Because if we're moving in the back, he can kind of feel that. And then it could also mess up his steering or sled positioning in different turns and straightaways. And then once we finish, like I said, the guy in the back of the sled is the brakeman. He's got two little levers that he kind of pulls. And what that does is it shoots teeth underneath the sled and kind of just digs into the ice and scrapes across. And then we slow down, hopefully stop before we get to the finish.
Where you smash into the wall, yeah. Hopefully.
No, there's no wall. It just continuously goes and turns into concrete at some point, and you
Oh
definitely
wow.
don't want. Yeah, I've been in. I was in a sled in Whistler where the brakeman wasn't able to get the brakes up,
Mm.
and we went like no brakes at all, flew through the braking stretch. And Whistler's the fastest track in the world, so that's the track where you can get close to 100 miles an hour. So we're flying through the track. We get past the finish line, and the way that tracks usually work is as soon as you cross the finish line, it usually is an uphill section to help kind of slow the sled down. And then while you're pulling the brakes, you'll stop and there's a little gap in the wall. You can kind of pull your sled off to the side. So we don't hit the brakes at all. We go flying through the braking stretch. And eventually the ice is going to stop. And it's went from ice to wooden pallets that we were sliding on top of, and then it went from wooden pallets to we hit like this really thin rubber mat, kind of like you'd find like gym flooring basically.
Mm.
And then we slid across all of that and landed on concrete and slid across concrete. And we were going fast enough to where we hit the concrete. You could smell the metal burning underneath us from the runners sliding on the concrete so hard. And
Holy
in
shit.
bobsled, the number one thing in bobsled is your runner. Like in terms of piece of equipment, like your runners can make the biggest difference when it comes to race time. So if they get little scratches in them or if they get nicks, that could cause drag or friction on the ice, which makes you go slower. So we hit all 4 on concrete and basically scraped the shit out of them, flattened them all out, and just ruined an entire set of runners. And that happened to be like one of my first actual races in my first, on my rookie year. So the brakeman that had that happen learned really quick that you need to get on the brakes and pull it as hard as you can. But outside of that, that was like a once in a lifetime thing. That generally doesn't happen.
Holy shit! Like you can smell the metal. That's intense, mate. Like,
Yeah,
jeez.
it was like through the outrun, we were probably still going 80 miles an hour, which in some tracks, like it's like the top speed you can hit in the track. But at Whistler, since the top speed you can hit is upper 90s, we still hadn't touched the brakes. We hadn't slowed down a whole lot. So we're going 80 miles an hour through all that. And then as soon as that steel hit the concrete, you just smell it burning.
It's like something out of a cartoon where people just run through walls, right? And they just leave
Yeah.
like a cartoon shaped hole in the wall. Like I could
Yeah.
just imagine people just looking at you like, are they supposed to like, slow down now? And you just go zooming past. They're like, what
Oh,
the?
everyone knew something was up. So,
Oh dear.
like, because the team, the team that was in front of us was another USA team.
Hmm.
So they saw us go flying by and they immediately started running after us because they were like, oh God, this is going to be bad. So they started running up the track to try to see what was going on and help out when they can. And they also says, like, as we were running up, all you could smell was metal. Like, you just smell the steel that is just melted from dragging across the concrete that fast.
How'd you know when to yank the brake? Does someone shout at you, or like is there a buzzer?
No. So every track is the same track every year. So every track is not the same, but like Lake Placid, there's only 20 turns and there only is going to be 20 turns. So you memorize the track and you know, turn 4 is going to be a left and turn 10 is going to be a big right and everything. So you know where you're at in the track. And as soon as you cross, there's the final timing eye and you can, like for instance, in Placid, you hit the last little right, you wait like a half second and you've crossed the line, and then you can pop up and pull the brakes. Where in other tracks, like in Austria, they've got kind of like a double braking stretch. So you've got a brake and then there happens to be one last turn. You got to pop back down and then pop back up and brake after that turn. But you memorize all the tracks because you know that they're going to be the same turns every single year. So you know exactly when you're supposed to pull the brakes and when you're supposed to be down. And that's kind of the way that we can help the pilot out is if we're at a certain track and you're sitting in that 4-man, you know a big left is coming up, you kind of like brace yourself a little bit so you don't go slamming into the left or right side of the sled. So you try to stay as still as possible in the back. So the brakeman will watch videos on the tracks, learn the turns, try to figure out, okay, like this is a big turn here, we got to brace for it, or maybe this is a part of the track that's like a long straightaway, which at that point, if we're happen to be out of position or if we need to move, you don't want to move because you could pop the sled left or right. So there's little things that kind of go into it in terms of track to track and memorize everything.
Wow. It's like that reminded me of the little scene in Cool Runnings when they're trying to remember the track.
Yeah. Yeah. Except for we don't sit in bathtubs bobbing and weaving back and forth.
Oh, you don't?
We just watch it.
Is that not bobsled?
No, that's not bobsled. I've never seen anybody do that.
Do you like Cool Runnings?
Yeah, it's a great movie.
It's a brilliant movie.
But it is definitely over exaggerated at points.
I mean, it's definitely a comedy, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
we don't sit in bathtubs. We're not bobbing and weaving left and right.
You don't have
in terms of like
a little chant that you do, a little song.
Like the racing points of the movie, the racing points are pretty accurate. Like you're up at the top, you push, you're trying to brace everyone else, you got to qualify, all that kind of stuff. So that's all generally the same.
No bathtubs though.
No bathtubs for us.
Hey, I mean, there could be a new program coming out next year or this year. Coach comes up to you, all right, boys, we're gonna sit in a bathtub. And
I don't know if you can get 4 of us in a bathtub.
Yeah, it'd have to be a pretty fucking big bathtub, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how they got all of them in that one.
Yeah, it had to have been a big bathtub.
Yeah,
Because
no.
the tubs that we got access to at the training center, you're not fitting 4 dudes in that.
Nah, definitely not. Like
No.
you're gonna have to have leg slots in the bottom where you can like pop them down. Uh,
Yeah,
I
not
get you.
happening.
I get you. So when is the Olympics has been postponed to, is it this year?
The Summer Olympics got postponed to this year. Our
Yeah.
Olympics are technically going as planned, so they weren't supposed to happen until February of 2022. So as far as we know, everything right now, like this is what like we call them quads.
Mhm.
So every 4 years between Olympics. So this is going into our 4th year of the quad, so the
Mhm.
Olympic year. We just got the schedule out to us, and the schedule looks like it should have looked. So we're still shooting for Olympics in February.
Wow. Awesome, mate. Absolutely awesome. Well, good luck. Is everything on track?
Yeah. Our process for selection to make the games is, I would say, like maybe about 30% done right now. So we just finished up some races in Park City last month. We finished up a couple more races in Lake Placid where it's just USA Racing USA,
Mhm.
and it's kind of a ranking system, more for the pilots than anything else. So all of our pilots have now raced each other 4 times on the same 2 tracks, and they've gotten like treated like a little mini race. So they've gotten points, and we know who the rank of pilots is now. Like we know 1 through 6 on the men's side. So based on that rank, we have an idea of what pilots are going to be going on the World Cup next year. But in terms of like in the world of bobsled, anything can change at any point. This was just kind of a general process of what they need to do. So the next step is we do what's called push champs, and that will be in July and in August. And push champs is where we use that training push track I was talking about.
Mhm.
And you have every guy push from every position. So left, right, and back. And you have just basically just go out there and see who pushes the fastest. So they measure you from the 10-meter mark up into the 50-meter mark, or give or take 5 meters on either end. And they're trying to figure out like, okay, who's the fastest from what positions, what guys look the best, who do we think can push good with someone else. So after we do individual push champs, the next month following that, we'll do combination push champs. So where coaches will look at the numbers, pilots will go, I want to push with this guy, or I want to see this group of guys, and we'll do the same thing, but we'll do it with 3 guys at a sled on a time. So basically like a 4-man push. They'll all 3 push, and they'll switch up combos, see who pushes better from where, and then just kind of get numbers on everybody. And from that point on, they'll name the national team, and then that national team will start racing in October and make it all the way up until January. And based on how races are going, they're probably still going to be switching out people, give and take here or there on all of that. They're going to finally name the team in January for the Olympics that will go in February. So on the pilot side, a lot of it has been decided, but another big chunk for them is if they're going to be able to go out and race. So just because they won these last 4 races and the rankings are what they are right now doesn't mean when racing starts next year that those rankings are still going to be the same. Like maybe the guy that's in second bumps up to first, or maybe the guy that's in third bumps up to second. Like you don't know exactly what's going to happen until you put guys behind them and start racing other countries.
Mhm.
So there's still so much in the air. Nobody knows exactly like 100% that this person's going or not. And we won't actually know all of that until January.
Wow, that is a big chop and change, you know, like I mean, but at the end of the day, if you're in a sport where degrees of error go down to the hundredths of a second, like that's the nature of the sport, right? How
Yeah. Yeah. The
many people,
sport is,
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, the sport is definitely like you have a job, but it's not a guaranteed job ever. So you've
Yeah.
always got to go out and perform. And there's always going to be somebody that can hop in and take your spot on the sled. And they're going to look at that all the way through and then make that decision in January, like last moment possible, where they go, okay, this will be the Olympic team based on what we've seen all this year. And then they'll finally send them to the Olympics
And whereabouts is it held, this next one?
in Beijing in
Oh,
China.
wow. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. So
Really, it's a really cool. I think they did a really good job in '08.
2008. Yeah.
Yeah.
2008.
Yeah, they did a
Yeah.
really good
So
job with that
I've heard
Olympics.
some. pretty cool things. I've heard that because of the timing of the year, it's in February, because it's in Beijing, that they want to do like a combination Olympic uh, ceremony plus Chinese New Year ceremony, and like all sorts of
Wow.
different stuff. That sounds really cool. And I mean, they're still 100% planning on having the Olympics as is. I don't think they're planning on like not having fans the same way Tokyo is right now. And I think they're planning on having everything run as smooth as possible. So hopefully everything continues getting better. People get vaccinated or whatever it is that we need to do in order to go over there and race. But yeah, China is 100% on board with keeping it going as is. And according to the schedule we just got, that's kind of reaffirming everything's going to go to plan. So
Mm.
hopefully it all stays that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it'll probably end up being a, hey, if you don't have that ticket saying you've been vaccinated and you can't go spectate and things like that, which I mean it should be, right? Like do whatever you need
Yeah.
to do to make sure other people are healthy. Like it's not, it goes way beyond yourself, right? It's, you can look at yourself like, well, I could get it and it's not going to do anything to me. I was like, yeah, that's great, but that's so self-centered. Like it you could pass that fucker on and it could wreck someone. So, if you need to do this, just
Yeah.
just do it.
Yeah. And we had a successful season this year. Like throughout the pandemic, we were able to travel around Europe. We got tested twice a week, every single week for every single race. So it was basically 3 months of just constantly getting Q-tips shoved down our noses. But I think it was more of a proof of concept of anything else that you can have multiple countries all traveling around and being able to stay virus free by following certain protocols. So that I think that was also kind of a big plus to show that we can still hold these events and hold these in a certain way to where it is safe for everyone and we can still compete and still have a show and do everything we need to do. So I think they'll do something along the lines like at a minimum it'll be like that at the Olympics. But yeah, like you said too, if you can get vaccinated or if the situation in February of next year is much better than it is now, like we're hoping that they allow fans to come over.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Like that's what makes half of it, right? Like that's what builds the atmosphere and gets the nerves going. And it's
Yeah.
sport is like 50% the performance and 50% entertainment. Like it's basically modern day gladiators, right? It's warfare
Yeah.
to points.
Yeah, and this season we weren't allowed to have fans, so all of our races were just like races with no fans, and it was very strange to be at some of these tracks and pushing and not having anybody there cheering. It
Mm,
almost felt like another training day, except
mm,
for besides training, we're in our speed suits and we're actually racing today. But yeah, some of the places like we go to in Germany, there might be 5,000 people watching the race because Germans love bobsled. So we could be out there and have just an entire crowd around us as we're pushing. But this year it was just nobody. So some of those tracks, it was really eerie to just be setting up, getting ready to race, and not have that additional kind of like jittery feeling of having the fans there getting ready to amp you up. So
mm.
I would definitely appreciate having fans at the Olympics. At
Yeah.
least something like pump some fake crowd noise or whatever it is. Have like cardboard cutouts of people if you need to. But yeah, sports wouldn't exist without fans. So it's definitely a 50-50 give and take. Like they come to watch us perform and we perform because they do come and they allow us to perform for them. Otherwise, if nobody gave a shit about it, like it would just be us sliding down a hill and it would probably just be on a normal ski hill. Like nobody would care.
Yeah. Yeah, and the more crowd, the more sponsorship, the more attention, the more eyes, the more viewers, pay-per-view, all that kind of
Exactly.
stuff. Like yeah, it all feeds in and then that goes back down to the youth. And then again, it links back to pulling people out of situations that they might not want to be in and they can try different sports and all that. And it literally does start with flick the telly on and watch the games or
Just
buy
happens to
that,
be on there.
yeah, or buy that $15 ticket and go watch whatever it is, like ultimate slalom, bobsled, whatever. Like if it's a sport that you don't know, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to enjoy it. So go for the entertainment aspect and then maybe learn a little bit about the sport too.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think the Winter Olympics is perfect for that because if you're not in it, you probably don't know anything about the sports within the Winter Olympics.
Absolutely.
So you smack the telly on and you learn something about it, or if it's in your hometown or whatever, you go watch it, you'll learn something about it. Again, it helps out those athletes too.
Yeah, exactly. And like for bobsled specifically, like the Winter Olympics is really the only big time that we get like our time to shine on an international stage.
Mm,
So the fans make a big part of just the Winter Olympics in whole, and in our sport specifically is this is kind of like our big crowning moment for every 4 years. It just leads into Olympics, and then like unfortunately the year after or the 2 years after, nobody's really caring about bobsled or what's going on. But then as soon as it comes back on to the Olympics, they're watching it again. So we're all excited for this upcoming year.
mm. Well, I'm excited. I'll be tuning in. Like I would go watch it, but it's a fucking long way. Um, so I'll be tuning in 110%,
Yeah,
and I'll be cheering from this bottom corner of the world. Um, Good luck, mate.
nice.
Absolutely crush it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Nah,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time. I'll let you get back to some Warzone with the boys. And
They should be hopping on soon.
yeah, there you go. And then don't get hit by a brick wall when you start with training again.
Yeah, we'll just grind through that first week and make it through.
Yeah, good luck. All right, man. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Peace.
Thank you.